So, mate, that just must have been an absolute nightmare. And then you're kind of finding that you're sliding downhill with that. Would you mind telling us how you came back? What every level of this story is genuinely incredible. But to me, the coolest thing, and I think, me personally, I think the thing that gives you most credit is, and what you did was incredible, like going out to try and chase this idiot down with bullets in you. I mean, that's uber cool, and that's deserving of a bravery award. And if anything is, you earned that, bro. But coming back from, how would I articulate this? I can only use this language, the demons in your head. Like that would be, that's the most incredible thing. Really, really it is. I mean, the physical courage you showed was up there, but the mental courage afterwards. And then the idea that you're paying it forward. And I know I'm getting ahead of it, but I want to get into how you're paying it forward. But can you tell us what you did to negotiate this mental maze?
Well, we were very young when we joined the police, and I was straight out of school, and so there hadn't been much training in relation to mental health. And I remember when I was working with a first-year constable. I was a field training officer, and she turned to me and she said, "This is the mid-90s," and she said, "Oh, my father's actually not too well. He's got some issues with depression, and he's on medication. He's had to be hospitalised." And I thought, oh, do you come from a family of people who are not quite right in the head? And that was just my ignorance, and that's where my thoughts were on mental health. But I got lucky. A couple of months before I was injured, I was in a patrol car working with Brad Britton. I can even remember the street that we were driving down, Beams Road, back to Boondall Police Station. Brad had just recently had a secondment in traffic branch. He'd been on a motorcycle, got involved in the pursuit, gets into a situation, the cars, coming at him. And it's a little bit more involved. But at the end of the day, he had to draw his firearm out to use lethal force. And so we're driving back to the station on Beams Road towards Boondall Station. And I say, "Hey, Brad, that shooting when the car drove at you and you had to shoot at it, what's going on?" He said to me, "Oh, Greenie, the internal investigation, it's ongoing. It's like they're trying to say that I unlawfully discharged my firearm in danger of the public. I'm stressed, I'm angry, I'm taking it out on the family." And what he said next was a big point. "Mate, things are so bad, I'm seeing a psychiatrist." Brad was a little bit older than me. He had more life experience. He'd worked in the postal service, grew up on farms, grew up with firearms. And so I got to thinking, well, because initially I just thought, I'm crazy. That was it. There's something wrong with me. I'm a lesser human being. Then I thought back, well, you know what? I have a lot of respect for Brad, and he's a good friend, and he shared that with me. Well, if he can ask for help, maybe I should. Yeah. And I'm very grateful. Smartest thing I ever do. I actually got in touch with Brad, found out the psychiatrist who was treating him, and put me in contact with an excellent psychiatrist, which today can be very hard. The backlogs are so huge. And it even happened at this time. Rang up, make an appointment, and they said, look, we could see you in 4 weeks' time. And then I explained and said, "Oh, look, I need help sooner. I was one of those police officers who was, shot in Chermside recently. The government's still in the loose." And then this lady realised that this is just a secretary. She realised, okay, you probably need more help than some other people, given what you've just been through. So I went in and saw this amazing psychiatrist, and he had a lot of experience. So experience, count, especially when it was so severe. It's something like mine, and it took me a while to open up. But I remember one of his very first sessions, he said to me, he said, a soldier going into battle has time to prepare. They've got the adrenaline rushing through their body. They're mentally preparing. This is what I've trained for. I'm going to give myself every opportunity, to, do my job, but protect myself and protect my fellow soldiers. So it's like you and I sitting here talking. Somebody's come up, put a gun to your head, shot you in the head. Your body has no time to physically or mentally prepare. And so that exacerbates the mental health impact dramatically. And then he went on to say, pretty much the only thing worse that could occur to you from a psychological perspective is seeing your family executed in front of you.
Wow.
So that was a big, big moments. And I've had other moments which were, just sort of wake-up calls for what I was in for.
And explaining what's happening in your body, that must have helped, Greenie. Like, okay, you're feeling this way, but this is what's happening with you. This part of your body is doing this. This part of your body is doing this. This is making you feel this. You're not in control of this.
Education is power. Education. So now I've got a bit of an understanding. This is a very long journey, and it got very frustrating. So I'll give you an example. This is something that's quite personal. People don't want to talk about these things, and so rather than people there who might be listening and suffering and might have gone through something terrible, and I know somebody who just had an industrial accident. I was speaking up at Toowoomba, and they went aside and they told me about the effects on them, which was very similar. To me, person's lucky to be alive. They got slammed into the head by this big piece of metal stuck on a chain that snapped loose. And so surgery, medevaced out, etc. And so, yes, obviously he had dreams, and he was having some hyperarousal and some other problems. But one of the big ones for me, and I didn't speak about it for a while because it took time for this doctor to build trust with me. And one of the big things was speaking to somebody else who'd been through a similar experience, a police officer, Sergeant Ray Vandenbosch, who had to shoot and kill somebody. And we talked about this, and I think, thank God I'm normal. At the time of the shooting, I was in a relationship. I had a girlfriend, not a very serious relationship, but we got on. We had fun together. And one of the side effects of the shooting, my libido, it absolutely skyrocketed. And she actually, said to me, 12 months, 18 months afterwards, you said, your desire for intimacy was so much. I just nearly ended the relationship on that. But I couldn't help it, because the thing is, it wasn't pleasure. It was just absolutely like a release. And so I was really shy about this. And then I spoke finally to the psychiatrist about it. And he's, sort of smiled and leaned back, and he said, and explained, he said, mate, this is part of the course. What's happened is you've had a life-endangering experience. Your biological system is saying your life could end at any time. We are here to reproduce. And so let's just put your reproduction system on overdrive. And that's what was going on behind it. And then the funny thing is, I did go into medication for antidepressants, which did help, but also had a side effect of affecting my libido in another ways. Look, let's be honest here, and that is that I couldn't orgasm. And so I could, participate, in being intimate, but it would take a very, long time. And so there was another aspect. But I'm not telling this to shock people. I'm just want to let people to know what it really is like, because
this is what happens.
Me. Yeah. Yep. Besides police officer who shot somebody, I was a Vietnam veteran who was a police psychologist who counseled me. I'm very grateful for all these people sharing their experience to make me feel it's not me. This is just how the body reacts under such extreme conditions.
So you're seeing these people, you're talking to people. I'm thinking you're getting a little bit of support from the family too. That's the case.
Oh, yeah. Without my mum and dad, I simply would not be here. Because they were the ones, they took me to the hospital, saw me through all the operations, took me out and nursed me through all these horrific operations. 20 months of reconstruction surgery of my mouth. But because that first bullet It had smashed the maxilla bone, destroyed 5 teeth, deflected down, entered my tongue and lodged in my throat. So to look at me, even after the shooting, and you'll just see that looked like I was missing a few teeth. And to this day, I tell people, oh, yeah, I was shot in the head. Well, where? Oh, right here in the face. Can't notice anything. Well, the round has actually just left a very small nick here, but I had very good plastic surgery to help cover that up. And so it's only if I ever try to grow facial hair do you notice anything. So I'm very grateful for what they did. But now I want to take you through about what people don't see for the families. Now, it got so bad for my father. At the time, there was no support. Now, work cover was paying for all my operations and all my mental health appointments and medications. Nothing for the family. Things got so bad for my father, he became depressed. And I talked to the psychiatrist about it, and he was a very generous man. And so he would see me, and without charging, he'd see my dad for 15 minutes afterwards, speak to him about what was going on with dad and what he was seeing and how him and mum were helping support me. And he prescribed depression medication for dad. And that really helped dad, because this is things like that to deal with. So the very first one, the night of the shooting, it was so chaotic. Do you think a police vehicle came to the house, picked mum and dad up and took them to the Royal Brisbane Hospital to see their son? Things were so chaotic on this night, where, nothing like this had occurred in recent history. You've got 3 shot police officers and a gunman on the loose in a suburban neighbourhood. And it was chaotic. So if you put yourself in the people trying, like Brett Price, trying to manage the situation. Now, Brett's at the scene. He's established a forward command post. At the hospital, there's no family there, supporting us. Charnel said to Kylie, can you ring my parents? So she rang her parents. And then she said, well, what do I do? What do I do about Chris? What do I do about Daryl? So she decided she's going to ring my parents. My mum gets out of bed to be about, I'd say about 5 a.m. in the morning. She goes to the telephone, picks it up, and Kylie again in shock. I remember Kylie at the scene of the shooting. She was holding her firearm and shaking when she was arrived. She was in the second vehicle, herself and Dave Hornby, and that was how terrifying this situation was. She was holding a revolver, shaking. She's up at the hospital. She phones Chanel's parents, thinks, oh, okay, phone Daryl's parents. Phones my mum and dad's place. Mum gets out of bed. She answers the phone. And she screams out, Daryl's been shot, drops the phone. She's in shock. My dad jumps out of bed. He rushes to the phone, picks up the phone, and Kylie's there and just communicated, Daryl's been shot. He's at the Royal Brisbane Hospital. And so they had to dress, they had to go to their vehicle, and they did not know the condition I was in. They did not know if I was on death's door, if I had was I going to never, walk again, talk again, being blinded, etc. So it was probably about 20 minutes drive for them, the longest drive of their life, to come to the hospital to see me, and they could find me that, considering what I'd been through, I really drew some good cards.
Yeah.
But during the reconstruction procedure, and unfortunately, it was a very long process, and so that follow-up and support didn't just materialise. I'm hoping the organisation's getting a little bit better, but there's so much pressure on statistics and crime figures and turning up for neighbourhood watch events that nobody was coming to see me in hospital. Nobody was coming to see me at home. I just got a little bit forgotten about. Oh, that's the human service officers, the police psychologist job. Fortunately, I had a very good police psychologist. But I'm going to take you into mum and dad's world just a little bit. So the first round of reconstruction over 20 months. Quickly step through that to show all this incredible, amazing work completed by Max, our facial surgeon, and other specialists. Now, one of those procedures was this. My first procedure was a bone graft. And after that bone graft healed, after the bone graft was put in place, they put a plate in my mouth, and that was to support the bone graft. And then I had another procedure. And when the surgeon took a 20-cent size piece of skin, this is that next procedure, a gum graft. So I've had the bone graft, had the plate in my mouth. All I could do was eat actually soft food. This is me at home with the bone graft.
Whoa.
That's taken in the evening. It's taken just after dinner. What's in the foreground?
Straw.
Yep. For months, I couldn't eat solid food. I was taking all my nourishment through a straw. It was just so debilitating and painful and horrific.
Yeah.
But mum and dad were there caring for me every step of the way.
Yeah.
But another procedure really shook them up. And I'm going to tell you about this one now. So after the bone graft with the plate in my mouth, taking my food through a straw, like there was numerous, procedures with other specialists because I was missing the 2 bottom teeth, etc. But the maxillofacial surgeon realised where the bone graft was that, well, you need new gum. So he did this. He took a scalpel, sliced into my mouth, and cut out a 20-cent size piece of skin, transplanted it over the bone graft, and this was to form my new gum. And when I woke from the surgery, the doctor said, "Daryl, the wound in the roof of your mouth, I cannot stop it from bleeding. Do not worry. Place this gauze in your mouth. It will soak up the blood and the wound will heal in time itself." Mum and dad take me home. Now, I'm on strong painkillers, but I was in intense agony and I couldn't sleep. And I'm lying in there with bad gauze in my mouth, this rough feeling. Even today, to rub my tongue over the roof of my mouth shivers down my spine because my memory is recalling this procedure. Not being able to sleep and the pain I'm in, I have sleeping tablets prescribed by the psychiatrist. So I take a heavy dose and I'm able to knock myself out. I'm able to get some sleep. And in the morning, my father's walking down the hallway. He's passing my bedroom and he looks in and he screams out, "Daryl!" He goes into my room because he wasn't sure if I was alive or dead. And I'll show you this photograph, and this is what I was wearing at the time. And then I'll explain what my father's first thought was.
Oh.
So mum and dad, well, dad's first thought was, has Daryl bled out? Oh my God. So he goes in and wakes me and was able to wake me up. Then he calls in mum. And I'm groggy. I'm in pain of losing all that blood. I'm just feeling miserable, absolutely miserable. I can barely support myself on my own weight. So they both had to physically help me to the bedroom. Now, if you to the bathroom. Now, if you take a look at this photograph, that's the blood on the shirt. Where's the rest of the blood gone? On the bed and on my chest. So they've taken the shirt off me in the bathroom, and I've got all this congealed blood. And so they had to get a sponge and sponge it off me. And my father never took many photographs in life, just not that type of person. But what I was going through, he couldn't explain it to relatives. And so he took a number of photographs when I was going through various procedures. And this was just one of them that they snapped. It's like saying, this is what we woke and had to deal with. A picture's worth 1,000 words. And it shows what mum and dad were having to deal with. And unfortunately, at the time, there was no support for them whatsoever, except for the kindness of people like the psychiatrist, Tom Bell, who was treating my dad for 15 minutes. So they played an incredibly important role. And even my father openly says that if they weren't there for me, like many of, an Australian or American Vietnam veteran come home and couldn't deal with their memories and turned to the bottle, and they didn't have people around them who understood what they were going through, and ended up, spiraling into mental health issues and even suicide. Dad feels that if they weren't there, I wouldn't be alive here today. And I would say that is correct, because it's just been such a horrific journey. When I fell, they were there to help pick me up, take me to the medical appointments, encourage me to seek that professional help and keep on going back. It's amazing what those few kind words, just, making food for me, washing, bedding, life was just so tough, turning up to these doctor's appointments. Yeah. So the family support network, the friends, is absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm. And mate, so you actually got to the stage where you were suicidal there. How did you and the family deal with that? That's nightmarish.
Well, you and I both went to suicides, and as a young constable, I didn't really understand it. These people taking their lives. And actually, we were just driving down Gympie Road the other day, and I pointed to a house to my dad and said, I went there. It was actually in my first year as a trainee with it's my first 3 months, because I was out of my 6 weeks with my field training officer. I was at mobile patrols. I was with Senior Constable Greg Self on night work. A man, early 30s, had taken his own life, and did it in a quite horrific way. I didn't have much understanding about this. And I'm not saying this to shock people, but what I wanted to say is, I think, what was going on with this guy? And then the officer, who had more experience than me, quite a few more experiences, and he was married and he had children. And I was shocked at his answer, and saying, well, he got divorced, couldn't see his kids, and he took his own life. And I just think he's a weak prick. And I was just really, shocked. And I thought, I don't know, I think he might have been quite a bit of pain. Well, I then come to have some understanding of what's going through the minds of people when they are suicidal. And how this occurred for me was, it's working away. So when I did my regraduate, after that 20 months off work, and I was very fragile psychologically, and a friend of mine had a good idea. Hey, Greenie, you're really good with computers. Why don't you come work with us in Argos, investigating internet pedophilia? And I was accepted, and I did my rehab at Argos. And 2003, and work cover, who's paying all my medical expenses, sends me to another doctor to inspect the reconstruction, maxillofacial Dr. John Ayler. So in my lunch hour, I ducked down from his rooms in Queen Street, from police headquarters to his rooms in Queen Street for a 5-minute consultation. I sit in his chair, and he looks at my mouth with his instruments. Daryl, sit up. Come into my office. Take a seat. Daryl, you were sat in my chair. What you have in your mouth, I cannot clean with my instruments. There's no way that you can clean it. You're at risk of septicemia. That's blood-borne disease. It's very dangerous. I'm sorry. You're a reconstructionist. Bio.
Oh.
I was completely blown away, because I've been through hell with the first reconstruction. Like the most, look, I'm not, I can take a bit of pain and a bit of punishment, but this thing was just like nobody likes going to the dentist. Your mouth is just full of nerves, and it was just, just horrendous traumatic pain. It was far more pain that I'd experienced on the night of the shooting. And I just sunk. I just got sick in the gut. And the other thing is, they never even had a solution for me. So not only was it knowing that, well, we need to do something else, but we have no idea. So it's that wondering, what if? And they actually came up with a model. And they said, oh, Daryl, what we want to do is we're going to take this chunk of bone here, we're going to cut it out and rotate it. Then we're going to take another chunk of bone from your jaw, put it in there as a wedge to get it straight. And then we're going to put a plate in your mouth and hold that all together. You think that might have been just a little bit intrusive? It was the most worst procedure I went under this entire experience. My head, when I come out of hospital, this is me when I've woken from that procedure. So that's in hospital from that procedure. So that's freshly done. But then after a couple of days, I go home. And this is what I was looking like at home.
Whoa.
So that was the first procedure of the second reconstruction. And it was like today, one of the things I do, Matt, I am very particular about my dental hygiene. I still actually have a dental hygiene program with WorkCover. I'm due to see the dentist on Wednesday. And so every 6 months, I see the dentist, and every 6 months I see a hygienist. So it's every quarter I see a specialist to help maintain this reconstruction, because as Dr. Arvia, the maxillofacial surgeon who did the surgery, he said the replacement is never as good as the original. So we want to try and keep this together as long as we can. But there's just been so many procedures and so many grafts. He said, like, I used to do karate when I grew up, and I was still doing it. He said, don't do karate. Any blow there can bust that superstructure, and goodness knows what we'll have to do. So when do I get to the point of thinking about, I don't want to go on?
Yeah.
After Dr. Arvia delivered his news that the first reconstruction has failed, I've gone back to work, and there was some comments that I'd had at previous times that weren't very supportive, because people just couldn't fathom what I'd been through, and I looked so normal. And colleagues said to the friend of mine who introduced me to Argos, he said, what's it with, Greenie? It's just a few dental procedures. Well, my mind, it wasn't on the job. I'm sorry. My mind is transfixed on what's to come. Searing pain, mumbling to be understood, and once again, sucking my food through a straw. So I really fell into a deep hole. I went to the police headquarters gym one night. I finished work as Argos. It's 10 p.m. I tried to work out, but I was emotionally exhausted, which left me physically exhausted. And I slumped on those machines, but head fell into my hand and said, I'm isolated, I'm alone, and nobody understands. And it's literally where I was, just on my own, and my dear mum and dad supporting me and seeing how distraught I was. And so it come time to face these operations. And so I'd stopped work. I was on WorkCover, and it's shortly before I'm due to go under the knife. And I know what I'm in for. And exercise is a big part of my mental health, and still to this day, especially in COVID. Like after this, I'm going to go down to my lap pool and do resistance band training in the pool. But this particular day, I'm out running, and I'm running across a bridge. I stop, I put both hands on the railings, I look over. Life is just a struggle. I can jump and it will all be over. And to me, I'd had these thoughts previously. I'd been on aircraft, been flying over to see my brother, and there'd be a break in between, with the first round of reconstruction surgery. The aircraft had experienced some really violent turbulence, and other people were all quite worried. Bags were falling out, really rough. For me, I thought, plane crashes, I don't care. The struggle's over. And this day over the bridge, I'd really got to the point where, if the plane fell out the air, that's fine, but I could actually do something this day. But the simple thing that stopped me, and I'm very grateful for this, is being a police officer. I've been to suicides, I've done the coroner's reports. I understood the effect on family and friends. So that one seed of information, I've said to myself, I cannot do this to mum and dad.
Yeah.
I can see no light at the end of the tunnel, nothing. Life is just struggle, pain, and misery. There is no joy in my life. But I stood, I turned, and I continued to run solely for the sake of my parents.
Good man.
And many years down the road, there was a short film made in relation to part of this journey, and it was picked up by Lifeline. There was an event held in Parliament House in 2018 when the police minister launched the film, raised funds for Lifelines, and the CEO of Lifeline, Bob Gykes, announced me as an ambassador for Lifeline. And
so you and Ray struck up a bit of a friendship. You want to tell me about that?
Yes, I had a very good boss, Inspector Dave Stevenson, who was able to build trust with me, open up, and we held some courageous conversations. And I had, he inspired me that I still had a future in the police, and that I was somebody who was worthwhile investing in. And so I knew that I had a little bit of an issue around firearms. And there's still some issues I have today with certain things. And it's like, I just went and got my hair cut the other day. She's a lovely lady from Romania. And she's noticed when she takes out the cutthroat razor to shave the back of my neck, that, it's like I'm on white knuckle airlines, because that cutthroat razor, it reminds me of the surgery with all the scalpels. And so I had a similar issue with firearms. And so I spoke to Dave Stevenson, who was supporting me, as in not only continue my career, but even says, hey, one day on the over said, Greenie, I don't know if you realise that, mate, but you make a great senior sergeant and you're ready for promotion. Well, I knew that I had a fear around firearms and violent instances, and it did bear out. And so I didn't want to, be out there as a police officer and possibly in situations and overreact. And so I knew that desensitization had worked for me previously by closing my eyes and talking about the night of the shooting. And desensitization doesn't work for everyone, but for some people it does, and it's incredibly powerful. So I thought to myself, well, that's worked for the night of the shooting and explaining when the bullet, impacted, my face and how I jolted up to it. And now I can just talk about it and have no issues with it. When they play the audio of the shooting, no problems. But organisations, particularly the police, highly risk adverse. And a lot of people ask, well, what's in it for me? And if Greenie overreacts, could reflect poorly on me. So why would somebody support me? Well, Dave Stevenson was cut in a different vein. Dave Stevenson was the most supportive leader I've ever known. Now, it wasn't just me. It was many other people that he had this effect on. And so because he built trust and we held these conversations, and he shared parts about his life where things didn't go quite right, and I was sharing parts about my life. This particular day, we're together and I'm talking to him, and I say, look, Dave, I know you supported me to continue on with the career, but there's some issues I have around firearms and I want to do something about it. And just like, I actually want to try and become a firearms instructor. It won't be easy, but I think it could be very beneficial, to me, to help rebuild to me, help give me comfort around firearms and being a police officer, particularly if I was at somewhere where I would, possibly once again could have to call on using my firearm. A lot of people would think, this could go pear-shaped, reflect poorly on me. Why take the risk? Nobody's going to know. I'll just say application's not approved, and we'll just push it away. Dave Stephen wasn't like that. He didn't have a too hard basket. So he backed my application. I was placed on the firearm instructor's course, intense demanding 2 weeks course with PTSD. Extra tough for me because I had dreams, I had flashbacks, and particularly, and this is what I'm so, pleased with myself, for the good of myself and good of the community. I had overreactions. I remember one of the very first scenarios. It was a stimulus response scenario. So we have one firearm instructor. They're dressed in the black suit with the helmet, and they've got a machete. And they're held down by their side, and this is like turning up to a job. There's an armed man who's been spotted. So I have my firearm out and I have to, use, verbal communicate, cover the threat, but use verbal communication to try to de-escalate. And the very first time this happened, my verbal communication, as part of the scenario, it wasn't successful. I didn't know if he was going to drop it, lie down, or comply. But this time I didn't. He raised the scenario. He came for me. And what happened, what's supposed to happen now is I was supposed to fire a cadence of shots to stop the threat. What did I do? That gun went off like a machine gun. I just kept every round going into it. I want that threat gone. You're not coming near me. Boom, 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 boom. Anyway, I had really good instructors, and they come and I put armor and said, Greenie, you stopped the threat, mate, but not just quite like that. And so we went away, we spoke about it, and then we came back and we went through that again. And I got to the point, it took about 3 goes, and it got to the point where I didn't know if he was going to raise it or drop it, follow my commands, but it would get to the point where he would raise it, and I'd have to fire those cadence of shots. And I would only fire a cadence of shots that would stop the threat, and that was it. And so that was very good training for me in helping addressing one of the issues that I had about my personal safety and how we need to respond with the minimum use of force as police officers. So that was a big part of it. And there was I'm just trying to think. I just wrote a blog article about this. I'm just trying to think. A number of people on the course, must be roughly 20 odd officers, on this firearm instructors course, and one of them was a senior constable, Ray Vandenbosch, and we just sat beside each other, one day, because I went down the back of class. The only seat available on the very first day was beside Ray, so we got chatting. Well, it turns out I found out that whilst the offender who shot me was still at large, he's gone into a job at Deception Bay. A bloke's come at him with a large knife, and he's had to use lethal force, to stop the threat and kill the offender. And this affected him profoundly too. No police officer wants to shoot somebody, but he had no choice. And so we started to talk about, some of our, as time went on, started to talk about some of our overreactions. And one of the ones that made me feel normal, he talked about the same thing. His libido skyrocketed after his incident. And I thought, well, it's not just me, it's not, and it wasn't just the experts, the psychiatrists saying that's normal. He's just a police officer like me. He's been through an extreme situation, and the body's had that same reaction. But I was struggling a little bit on the course, and it's a difficult, course because of the amount of practice you need to do. And I'm a really diligent person because I'll go practice and do things my own time, but you can't do that with firearms. It's got to be in a controlled environment. And Ray now, and so I found that people who were good with firearms naturally, they were very coordinated. Well, Ray is a motorcycle rider. He was at driver training, and he actually does private motorcycle driver training. So extremely well coordinated, and one of the most proficient students on the entire course. Ray noticed I was struggling, and we'd built up this connection because of the events that we'd been involved in. And he said to me, "Hey, Greenie, mate, why don't you come over to my place on the way home and we'll run through some drills?" So, we took our utility belts, we took the molded replica Glock pistols, and funnily enough, for the common person thinking about, firearms training without a real weapons, but what we did is he helped me with my utility belt to get that even more squared away, to get everything into precise position. But then we just started on the dry drills and just breaking it down step by step, So it'd be simple things like this. You get your stance correct, you crack your knees, you're slightly leaning forward. Yeah, your non-preferred hands up here. And what a lot of people do, you're drawing your firearm, your hand comes down, you're bringing your non-preferred hand to the hand with the firearm. No, this needs to stay right here. You can see the threat, and you bring the firearm to the non-preferred hand, got it there, and then you punch out. And so we practice these dry steals just step by step. And the first one would just be, drawing, and then we'd bring it up to the hand.
Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, wax on,
yep,
wax off.
Exactly. And we did this for a number of days in a row, and this got my technique to the required standard, and that where I was able to pass the course and go on to become a firearms instructor. Because people actually failed the course, and I didn't want to be one of them. I'm so grateful for somebody who saw me who was struggling, who thought, well, I can give this bloke a hand. He made the offer, I accepted, and it wasn't just one afternoon. It was, 4 or 5 afternoons that we got this, practice in, and I was able to overcome one of the demons that had haunted me since the shooting. And I went on to become a firearms instructor. And when I did that film, it was a long road to try and get permission to do the firearms scenes, but we won't go into that. When that became possible, and that the person who was able to do it was Ray Vanden Bosch, who just taken the time to help somebody who was struggling. So I'm incredibly grateful to Ray.
He's a bit of a legend. If it's okay, if you're not up to this, or you just feel disinclined, you tell me. It's not a problem. This is Daryl's story, mate. If you wouldn't mind playing the recordings and the footage, and especially of the stuff, so people have got, because now we've spoken about your medical side of things, and those photographs were, well, mate, you're kind of downplaying them, saying, "Oh, it doesn't look all that bad." Yeah, it kind of did look pretty terrible. Yeah, respectful way, bro. Like, I mean that, totally, But yeah, like if we could kind of just run through all that stuff there, and the images of that you've got that you use for your presentations, that'd be fantastic. If you're up to it,
we can do that.
Thanks, bro.
I'll just play a short snippet of the shooting. If people are interested in the full version of the shooting audio, they just need to go to, it's twiceshot.com /shooting -audio / or if they just go to twiceshot.com and then there's the more button, hit that down and you'll see shooting audio. So I'll just play a small, to give people a taste, and play a couple of minutes of it to show that madness.
A knuckle dragger too, is he? Yeah. I've noticed, I've done the same thing I'm doing with yourself with Winston Noble, yeah? Yeah. You there? Hello? 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 Back up 407, please. Code 2. Good job. Hanbury Street, code 2. Any unit? Hello? Get the ambulance. Someone the ambulance to job 122, please. Not sure. All it's screaming. Get the ambulance for me. Job 122. Up code 1, please. We got someone shot. Someone's getting a gun shot. Code 1.
Whoa, bro.
That's a
It's pretty intense shit.
that's
Yeah.
a moment of that madness.
Mm.
And yeah, I go straight back there. And but the funny thing is, you know, look, even in the days we are now, sometimes a day of practicing that little bit of gratitude is a very powerful thing. And I still do it to this day. And even looking at that night, you know, the gratitude that I have, well, you know, I'm alive.
Thank
It
God.
would have been horrible for, you know, my parents, my, you know, nearly 90-year-old father who sat over there on the couch. That would have been horrific. I could have been terribly disfigured, or even worse, I could have been, you know, paralyzed or something horrific. And there's a police officer in the UK who was shot a few years ago. The gunman was on the run, and people were, you know, behind him, you know, and saying that, you know, that he's, you know, he's a modern day, you know, Jesse James, etc. Well, no, actually, he was just a vile, gutless thug who went up to an unarmed traffic police officer in the UK, shot him in the face with a shotgun and blinded him. And that could have happened to me. But fortunately, everything, you know, still works. And it's given me some challenges in life, but it's also, as my dad said, you know, it's given me something that I can go on to do for, you know, whilst I can pretty much still stand the rest of my life. And that's keynote speaking, be it, you know, during COVID right now, I do it virtually, but I can't wait to get back in front of live audiences. If you look closely here, you can see there's this plastic apparatus. So the initial bone graft, they never transplanted enough bone. And so I've gone to another specialist called a prosthodontist, and he was supposed to put, you know, attach teeth to these 3 titanium implants, which are literally in my mouth on a 45 degrees angle. So he had to come up with this plastic apparatus, which you can see is the light pink there. And then that had spikes on it, which the teeth went into. But what would happen is that the food would get trapped between my gum and that plastic apparatus, and it was absolutely putrid. And that's why Dr. John Avia, when I've was seeing him, he said, you're going to get septicemia, because I couldn't clean it. And when they took it out, now the idea was that I was actually supposed to see this prosthodontist specialist every 3 months for the rest of my life to take that plastic apparatus out and clean it. But he felt that was just too long, that something's going to rot in there, and it's going to cause septicemia and put my health at risk, even my life at risk. And it was, I can remember when they would take that out, how it smelled. It was just the most putrid thing I've ever smelt in my life. We've both, been to jobs and smelt dead bodies, and I'd actually say it was worse than that. It nearly made me gag. It was so bad when you think of food left there, and that for 3 months decaying, and then it's taken out your mouth.
No, dude. Yuck. No.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the well-deserved award that you won?
There was the police service highest accolade for bravery, the Valor Award, and a few years later, the Governor General awarded a group bravery citation. And I think one of the things that I'm most is proud of is winning a scholarship for speaking.
Well, mate, kudos, and you really have. You've paying it forward, and it's an inspirational story, and it's one of those kind of things where, it's true, especially showing what happened at the event. You've clearly got a high degree of personal courage and moral fibre. I don't know if I would have been trying to chase down a guy after getting a couple of bullets in my. I don't know how I would have gone with that. But even taking that into account, the fact that you've not let him win, that was another thing that I got from that. And this massive paying it forward, where even taking into account that physical courage that you've got, that's something probably kind of natural. If you can overcome these other terrible kind of things, it means that other people can take it away, that they can as well.
You just don't know what's in you, and also just how much a little bit of help. Like Dave Stevenson. I was walking down an academy path one day, and I was just thanking him. It was 2008, and I said, Dave, I know I wasn't firing on 8 cylinders. Thanks for your support. And he's turned to me and said, Greenie, you may not realise it. I never told you to do anything. I only made suggestions. You acted on those suggestions, and so I invested further in you. And so it's, you've got to get off your ass to help yourself, and that. But if you've got people around supporting you, and some people might just sort of walk on by. Ray Vandenbosch, he could have walked on by and seen me flounder when I did the firearms. He didn't. He made the offer for me to pop in and to do those drills. And that little offer, a little bit of help, went so far. And there's been so many of those occasions in my life that I wouldn't be here today doing this. Not only recovering from the shooting, becoming a firearm instructor, remaining in the police 20 years after the shooting, let alone starting a business, becoming a professional speaker. So I hope that I can encourage others to, help themselves, and for others around those people who are having some difficulties or struggling, will offer them some help. And if they accept, invest in them, and then invest in them more.